Welcome to our three-part series on inflation. The first part deals with the basics of inflation. What is inflation? Inflation is a general rise in the level of prices in the economy, which includes prices of goods, services, and basically everything that is there in the economy. Deflation is a decline in the levels of all prices. Now, what is disinflation? Disinflation means that there is inflation, that is, the prices are rising, but the inflation rate decreases. So let us say the inflation was earlier at 10%, that is, year on year, every year the prices were increasing at 10%, then the prices in following that start increasing at a rate of 5%, that would be called disinflation. Hyperinflation is an extremely rapid and out of control inflation. To give you an example, this happened in Germany in around 1922. In 1922, the maximum denomination of the mark was 50,000 mark. In 1923, it actually became 10 trillion marks. So you can imagine what kind of inflation the Germans saw in around 1920s. So why do the governments bother so much about inflation? What are the effects of inflation? Firstly, each rupee buys less and the purchasing power of people decreases. So earlier, if a loaf of bread was costing rupees 10, now it is costing rupees 20. So effectively rupees 20's power has now decreased. So because earlier in rupees 20 you could have got 2 loaves of bread, now you get only 1. The interest rates rise. Let's not get into very economic details, but one purpose of interest rate is actually to cover for the inflation. So when the inflation rises, the interest rates tend to rise as well. Whenever there is inflation, the poor are impacted more than the rich. Because poor have a lot less money than the rich, they tend to spend more percentage of that income than the rich. So when the price rises, the poor are not able to afford the basic necessities, and hence the actual survival of the poor starts getting impacted. Also, the lenders are hurt and the borrowers are helped. So the income distribution in the economy starts to change. Now, why is this? When, let us say, today A lends to B rupees 100 with the promise that after 1 year B will repay 150. This is in today's scenario. Now, when there's inflation, suddenly that 150 rupees that B is going to give back to A costs a lot less. So it values a lot less. So A is now getting hurt. So lenders are hurt, because he thought that, okay, 150 rupees to next year when I will get 150 back, I will buy, let us say, 3 cars. But now after inflation, he will, with the same money that he is getting back, he will be able to buy only 2 cars. But the borrower, effectively is paying less value. So which he said money paid back is worth less. The real wages of workers is getting reduced. Real wages means, so what is the money worth in terms of the goods and services that it can buy? Obviously that reduces. And it also decreases the value of savings. What are the theories of inflation? What causes inflation? There are 3 kinds of inflation. This is traditional theory. Later theories have added to this, but basically there are 3 kinds of inflations: demand pull inflation, cost push inflation, and quantity theory of money. We'll get into some detail of each of these. Demand pull inflation. Demand pull inflation in very simple terms means too much money chasing too few goods. Excessive growth in demand literally pulls prices up. So it means that if the demand in the economy suddenly rises for whatever reasons, in that case, the prices of the goods will start to increase. So if, let us say, for whatever reasons, the people start demanding more and more for some goods, the prices of those goods will obviously increase. Cost push inflation. Cost push inflation is basically the supply side. So if there is an increase in the cost of input, the companies will need to increase the prices to maintain their margins. So basically, let us say that for some reason there is a failure of wheat in the economy in 1 year, because of which the price of wheat increases. So the bread manufacturers are now facing a higher cost of the wheat that they are using in the bread. So they will need to increase the price of the bread to maintain their margins or to even remain in business. So now the people who will be using bread as let us say people who will be using bread in some other business, let us say bread pakoda somebody is selling, now he will again have to increase his price. So there is a spiral of price increase in the economy which happened because of the supply side. The inputs were getting costlier or they were not easily available. The third is the quantity theory of money. This is very simple. If everybody in the economy has some money, now let us say we airdrop some money to everybody in the economy, which basically means we increase the money supply in the economy. So if I was holding rupees 100 in my hand and I was willing to pay this rupees 100 for, let us say, a Maruti card. Now if I am given another $100, now I'll be, because that rupees 100, now I have 200, so I will be willing to pay that 200 for a Maruti card. So effectively the prices will also increase in the same proportion. So when there is excess money in the economy, the prices will rise in the same proportion. These are the three basic theories of why inflation happens in an economy. Now, how to control inflation? There are three broad ways of controlling inflation. First is the monetary measures, then the fiscal measures, and then the other measures. What are the monetary measures? The monetary measures, first I'll tell you what it is and then I'll tell you what kind of inflation it helps to control. First of all, it is about just lowering the money supply. Like I said, if there's excess money in the economy, everybody will be willing to pay more for the same goods and hence the prices will rise. So if I reduce the money in the economy, as a corollary, the prices should go down. So that is basically like when you hear about RBI increasing or decreasing money supply, it is basically doing exactly this. When the RBI reduces the money supply in the economy, it is trying to bring down the prices using a monetary measure. The second thing under monetary measure is credit control. Now, how do you control credit? Credit is basically lending of the banks. How do you play around with that to decrease inflation? First of all, you can increase interest rates. So what that means, it becomes more expensive for borrowers to borrow that amount of money from the banks. So generally the borrowings would reduce. And as you can imagine, obviously, as a corollary, the money in the economy will reduce and again the prices will come down. Another thing that it can do is to increase reserve ratios. In very simple terms, what is a reserve ratio? So when a bank lends rupees 100 to a customer, what it does need to do, it needs to keep some money aside. Let us say for every 100 rupees it lends, it has to keep, let us say, I'm just taking rough numbers, 10 rupees as a reserve. So it can lend a certain amount. So it needs 110 rupees to lend 100 rupees. Now let us say I increase this reserve ratio and I say that you need to keep away 20 rupees. So effectively, if the bank had 110 rupees, it now has to keep away 20 rupees. So the amount it has to lend is only 90. So effectively the banks will be able to lend less. So even though the interest rates haven't increased and so the people will be demanding same amount of money, the banks are now able to lend less. Hence there is less money in the economy and again as a corollary the prices will go down. The third is moral suasion. This is a very specialized thing. RBI has a lot of we can say influence on other banks because RBI is effectively the lender of last resort. It has government backing and it's a very basically important bank. So if the RBI tells the banks to lend less or to reduce the money supply or whatever it wants to tell morally to the banks, that is called moral suasion. So without using any instrument, it can actually just, because of its soft power, so to speak, actually convince the people and the players in the economy to do certain things so that the inflation can go down. So what are the fiscal measures? The second thing that we talked about was fiscal measures. Fiscal measures, what does it mean? Fiscal measures is what the government can do. Till now we talked about monetary measures, which is what the RBI does. Now we talk about what the government can do. First of all, when we said that what causes inflation, we said when there is high demand. So why is there demand? People have extra money. So what will it do? It can increase taxes. It can say, okay, I'm increasing the tax rate from 30% to 40%. So effectively people have lesser money left. So they will be able to not be able to pay that much for the goods and the prices will decrease. So that is the first thing it can do. Secondly, the government itself is a huge spender. So the government pays a lot of salaries to people. It purchases goods and services for its infrastructure products, projects, etc. So the government itself can reduce its expenditure. When the government reduces its expenditure, the demand of those goods will automatically come down. So let us say that The government was demanding, let us say, workers for construction projects, let's say in Manrega or other, let us say any government project. Now if the government reduces that spending, so those people will get less money, they will in turn demand less goods. So again, as a spiral, the prices in the economy will come down. A little more technical would be delayed debt payments. So whatever debt that the government holds, it can delay the payments, again reducing the money in the economy. Appreciate the currency. If you appreciate the currency, so basically earlier, let us say each dollar was costing rupees 50. So that sets the price at some level. Now if the currency gets appreciated, so now the each dollar costs rupees 40, let us say. So what is happening is, if for the imports we are actually paying less. So because the imports are set in dollar prices, so if there is something which costs $2, earlier we were paying $50, $100 for that. Now we end up paying only rupees 80. So which means that in rupee terms the price of that thing is reducing. So again that is a way of reducing inflation in the economy. The other measures are increasing production, encouraging savings, and basically commercial policy which helps the companies. Now these measures that we talked about are more to do with the monetary side. I told you that there are three kinds of inflation. One is the demand pull inflation, then the cost push inflation, and the monetary inflation. So these measures are more to do, as you can see, with either the demand pull inflation or the monetary side of inflation. Why demand pull? Because each time we are saying let us reduce the purchasing power of people, let us reduce the money in the hands of people. So we are saying that people are demanding more, hence the prices are high. So we should do something so that they do not demand as much. So that is what we discussed. But the second part of the side is the supply side, wherein the inflation is happening because of a supply shock. Let us say the oil prices increase, because of which everything in the economy becomes more expensive, or there was a crop failure of wheat, for instance, or rice, for instance. So obviously all the prices in the economy would go up. But what India has also seen in the recent years is also this kind of inflation, wherein the economy has so many bottlenecks that there are a lot of supply side constraints the economy is facing. So for example, people are now getting more health conscious and they demand more protein products. So people have started demanding more milk and eggs, but our economy is not producing as many milk and eggs. So it is because of the lack of supply that the prices are increasing. So the remedy for this, as you can obviously see, is not to actually reduce the money in the hands of people, but we need to increase the supply of milk and eggs. So which the government had tried to do by using all sorts of incentives given to farmers to have cattle and poultry products and etc. So each kind of inflation needs to be analyzed in more detail to see what kind of measure is actually required to tackle it. If the inflation is happening because there's a supply side constraint in the economy and we keep trying to reduce the money supply or keep reducing the income of people, that may help, but in the long run it will be detrimental to the interests of the economy. With this we come to the end of the first part of the inflation. In the later parts you will learn more about measurements of inflation and what has been happening in inflation in the recent years in the country. Thank you for watching the video. Hope you liked it. Comments and suggestions are welcome. Thank you.